What if intimacy isn't something we fix, but something we return to? In a time where so many couples feel burned out, disconnected, and under pressure to get it right, today's conversation invites us to slow down. My guest is Elana Auerbach, sensuality educator and author of The Sure Thing, a pleasure practice to revive the spark. Elana's work isn't about performance, techniques, or pushing desire to happen. It's about safety, play, and the radical simplicity of showing up, again and again, through a weekly pleasure ritual. In this conversation, we explore what actually shuts down desire, how shame and burnout live in the body, and why predictable rituals can create more freedom, not less. This is not a how-to episode, it's an invitation into presence, into curiosity, and into a different relationship with pleasure itself. Welcome to 34O, and welcome, Elana. I'm really glad to have you here.
It's a delight to be with you, Enrique.
So, I normally start a question like this when we start these conversations. And so how are you arriving in the body today?
Oh, what a great question. Thank you. I am feeling open and spacious, and I had a couple of weeks ago a case of vertigo. It's called BPPV. I can't remember what it stands for, but we have these crystals in our ears.
Oh, yeah.
And they can get dislodged, and then it creates vertigo. So I'm still recovering from that.
Oh.
So there's like a little bit of a wave, and I'm feeling really grounded. I'm rooting in, to the earth.
Yeah, I know this. You have that. My daughter had a very similar thing where she had like a virus on the balance nerve, which was a very daunting experience, and it's apparently not fun at all. Right. So I can imagine you feel a bit shaky.
Well, it's just a little bit of a wave. Like I'm maybe on a boat. Sometimes it feels like I'm on a boat as opposed to on land. But I'm adjusting.
You're adjusting now. Yeah, I think it is about getting the alignment right again, right? Readjusting and getting the balance back on track. Okay.
Yes. And how are you arriving in your body?
Yeah, I'm in a different time zone than you are, right? So here we are late at night, and it's dark outside, and it's winter, and I love winter in the sense that it's for me a resting season where we can actually slow down a bit and be more, I think, introverted to some extent, but looking forward and just relaxing and getting calm, I think, in the body. I mean, the summer is much more liveliness and out, enjoyment in that sense. But I guess that's also one of the beauties with having 4 different seasons where you can enjoy each one. They all have their beauty in its own right, I think. So I'm feeling very good. And I'm just looking forward to the conversation here as well today. So
I'm also enjoying the fallowness of winter, even though I'm here in Berkeley, California, where there are a bunch of the trees have no leaves on them. So that tells us, and it's in the 50s Fahrenheit, so It's a little chillier. But yes, it's a beautiful sunny day out here today.
Yeah, it's lovely. It is lovely. So obviously, you just released the book just a few days ago. The Sure Thing, pleasure practice to revive the spark. And I've been reading up a bit when I was looking you up on this, and I think I want to hear a bit more about what made you write the book and what led up to that. What was sort of your journey into that?
Well, how far do you want me to go back? That's the question.
It's up to you. I have time, so.
Okay. Well, I'll give a little. I grew up the quintessential good girl. I did, everything that authority figures, including my parents, wanted me to do. Did well in school and really had an experience of being disassociated, not fully in my body. And this was up until my early 30s, which included, studying math at UCLA, working on Wall Street. There I am working at this Japanese investment bank in New York City. And it's like, oh, this was my dad's dream, right? To make a lot of money and be in the financial world. And then still on that conveyor belt, I met this guy who looked perfect on paper. And though there was no chemistry between us. But, at that stage, it was like, okay, whatever. My parents will be so happy. Nice Jewish guy. And when he proposed, like a volcano erupted in my belly, screaming no. I ignored it and went along, just kind of suppressed what my body was telling me, suppressed, not even turning towards to be curious about what was going on with me, because I didn't have the courage at that time to hurt him, right? It was all, for me at the time, it was all about being codependent and making everyone else around me feel comfortable. And I was in that marriage for just a few years and put us both through the ringer, unfortunately. And, really trying to find him in my heart. And he already was in my heart. I loved this man. He just wasn't in my pussy. Like there wasn't that, right? So, and that doesn't, I tried to spark it. It didn't spark. Yeah. So we lived in New York, then lived in London, and then moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. And this was in the year 2000. I did a medicine journey with a Hakomi therapist. We were in couples therapy. I started working with a somatic therapist, did a journey and had this whole rebirthing experience. And at the end of it, she said, well, where does your spouse fit in? And he doesn't. It was so crystal clear. Yeah. And so I remember driving back to our house in Cole Valley and holding the steering wheel with like fear and excitement, and this was the most courageous thing I'd ever done at the time, was to go in and tell him I wanted to get a divorce, and he was sobbing on the couch, and I knew, like, there was that part of me that wanted to who could make it all better. I could just make it all better, and I could just shut down this part of myself. But yeah. I was so clear. So an aside, I really freed us both from this marriage, because soon after he met somebody, got married, had a couple of kids, and, he's
happy, living a happy life. Yeah.
And then I started, this is in my early 30s, started exploring pleasure in a community in San Francisco, and started exploring orgasm, and met who would become my spouse. And we started as research partners, and lots of chemistry, tons of chemistry, and had an open relationship for a couple of years, and then closed the relationship. Still great, great connection, lots of sex. And like many people, then we had a child, and our priorities shifted. And now we were focused on raising a kid, paying the mortgage, all the responsibilities. And we didn't have any kind of regular practice. Well, as far as intimacy practice and a practice to cultivate closeness with each other, we both have meditation practices. So we would meditate every morning. But over the course of about 12 years, we were struggling. I didn't want to leave this marriage. I had a very quick, I don't even, what is the word that when you with my previous marriage, I had an affair, a very quick affair, and told him about it very soon after it happened. And so I knew that wasn't an option for me. So we tried lots of other things. We tried lots of sexpert advice, this book, that technique. And then with a friend, in 2018, so this is about a decade into the struggle, we were talking, and she was a single mom at the time, and she wanted to have a Shabbat consort. Shabbat is the Jewish Sabbath that happens on Saturday, right? And so I learned when I was in Hebrew High that if you have sex on Shabbat, you get a double mitzvah, which is 2 good deeds. So she wanted to get her double mitzvah. We love that there's some interpretations of the Jewish tradition that are sex positive. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And so we were talking, I was like, damn, I want that too. I want to have a sure thing. And we called it a Shabbat unification ritual, a sure thing. Who doesn't want a sure thing? Well, it took me almost 2 years because there was so much built up gunk between me and my spouse that it wasn't until December 2020, after making love, that I invited him into this practice. After we made love in that afterglow space, I said, hey, babe, how would you like to have a weekly practice where we deepen in intimacy, connection, and pleasure? And he said, sounds great. And so then we just started, and we started just having this weekly. It turned out on Saturdays was when our son had a drum lesson. So that was our time, that we were, and it wasn't about having sex. And we often had sex. It wasn't about achieving orgasm, though there were orgasms. It was about turning towards each other and cultivating more pleasure and intimacy with each other. And so what then became this ritual was astounding, because all of that built up struggle and resentment and disconnect and withhold and all that yuck, practically it almost disappeared, I want to say overnight, because it was no longer about any of that. It was just, okay, now we have this structure that we know every Saturday, when our son is at his drum lesson, that's our time to explore together. And what happened for me was this part of myself that had come out in brief, sexual interludes in my 20s and 30s was now really having this whole canvas to, explore and make requests and have, these wild, ideas that it's really getting to know this part. I call her my wild sensual self. And I named her Vivacious Viv. And so this whole part of embodied, delightful activity is now something that where I learned to ski in my 50s. I'm training in Aikido. I'm at the dojo all the time. I'm hoping to become a shodan by the time I'm 60. We'll see. So this whole channel of energy and this whole part of myself that I didn't really know has been, it's just been wonderful for myself. And then what's happened with my spouse has been just so much more tenderness and closeness. And about 6 months into having our sure thing, after one of them, we often would high five because it was so simple and so profound. Like, I turned to him and I said, babe, I think I'm going to have to write a book about this because I want to share this. I can't keep this to just us. I want to share this. I want to share the love. And so began the writing of the book, and here we are.
It's beautiful. I mean, I just listen to your journey here. I think first of all, I think when you went into that first marriage, it feels like there's something I like to think about sometimes is the body never lies, right? First of all, right? So when you go against what the body tells you, it's sometimes, well, not sometimes, it is something you need to listen to because you're going to go against what's right for you in one way, right? And what you also then described with your spouse now, it feels like the family Inc. worked really well because you're focused on logistics and just making day-to-day life work. And in doing that, you stop communicating, you stop seeing each other, and then finding a way back. It's a beautiful journey about how you actually make that practice work, right? I think it's a beautiful way of getting more intimate. And I guess I assume you also have better communication as a result of that as well, right? having that intimacy improving, it must be improving your overall communication as well.
To improving everything, I have to say. What I realized, just to go back to you're saying that the body never lies, it doesn't lie. And that was Viv, that was vivacious Viv who was screaming.
Exactly.
It was like, don't do it. I had a tone. So, for that more than a decade, I was frustrated. And I was a biatch, I would towards my beloved. And so I would use a tone with him often that, would make him shrink and would make me feel icky. And there was one time, and so, I don't want to make it sound like, those 12 years were, yes, we managed life together and the family in a good way. And it was difficult. It was difficult because we weren't cultivating, we weren't simply turning towards each other and cultivating intimacy and enjoying, being in our bodies and sensual with each other. So,
yeah, I think it's so. If you think about this, then before this framework existed that you want to, that you've written about now, what actually didn't work in the relationship you had, not sexually, but more emotionally or somatically for you? Is there anything there that you felt was missing as well? Because you were living the logistical life in relationship, right?
Yeah, it felt like, people, it's kind of cliche now, but to say more roommates than lovers, right? We shared the same bed, but it was more like, okay, we're just, navigating life together, but not really navigating, exploring intimacy, which, my experience is that it's infinite, right? It's infinite. It's the same with pleasure, with orgasm. All of these realms are infinite. Awareness, these are infinite realms. However, if we don't agree to meet each other in these places, then we're not going to be exploring. We're not going to be growing together. We're not going to be deepening together. So it was very transactional, I would say, and not transactional from a sexual perspective. It was just transactional from everything. It's like, okay, I do the shopping, he does the cooking. It's just very mundane and dry, I would say, which would then make me be very constricted and enraged.
Yeah. I can tell from my own experience. I was in a long-term relationship for over 20 years, and it's very similar to what you went through. We ended up in a divorce in that process, but still very good friends today and communicate really well today. But it was more, when you stopped seeing each other, you stopped communicating, you stopped touching, the family Inc. worked really well, right? The whole logistical elements of parenthood and work and shopping, cleaning, yada yada. But the whole aspect of communication, respect, I think it ended up being more like resentment on both ends from our point of view, right? And when you end up there, it's I think you're doing a great deed here with helping couples to actually see that there's a way out of that sort of status quo that you almost end up in, which is not a nice place to be. And from the conversations I'm having, I think I haven't met one person who says, I want a bad sex life, for example, right? I think everybody wants that, right? More 99% of the people on Earth wants to have a good sex life. So opening up and being brave enough to talk about it, I think, is the first step in one way. When if you only shut down and don't communicate with your partner about it, it's a challenge.
Well, and if you communicate with blaming and shaming each other, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's your fault. Well, I'm the one who approached last time and you didn't, and then you rejected me. And, certainly we had all of that from all sides,
Yeah, I remember that too, and it feels like I tried to initiate that quite a few times, and in the end, I just caved in and stopped trying. Because
yes,
when you constantly get rejected, it's obviously not a very motivating place to be in, right?
no, and that's and the reality is that most couples are in that place, silently struggling and suffering.
Yeah.
Because we feel like it feels like it's a shameful thing that because we're told, what we see in the movies is, oh no, people have, hot sex lives 20, 30 years into it. No. And nobody tells you. Nobody tells you how to cultivate intimacy. Nobody tells us that having a practice, we know we have, if we want to get better at something, what do? We practice. But we think intimacy, that's supposed to magically happen. Well, it happened when we first were together, so why isn't it still happening?
It's like practice makes perfect, right? That's sort of where you need to start.
Right. Well, practice, yes, will cultivate, we'll cultivate something, whatever we're trying to cultivate. But we must practice it. And we've all kind of, I think, been bamboozled into thinking that our romantic relationships are supposed to magically continue on that lust and passion and chemistry that brought two people together. Our brain chemistry doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
So what do you feel couples often misinterpret as lack of desire when I think it's really self-protection in one way?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we turn away, we're like, oh no, I don't really need that. I don't really, you'll have a little desire bubble up. And, he's rejected me so many times, so I'm going to either take care of myself, right?
Yeah.
Or just try to disassociate from that part, from my sensual, sexual
self.
Part of me. Yeah.
I think a lot of these things, sexuality in many ways, I feel can also be inherited also from your parents and stuff like that in generational tax, if you will, right? So I think how do you feel? What's a good place to start to maybe stop that inheritance and, for example, stopping to passing it down to your own kids, for example? Do you have any tips on that? What can be done?
Absolutely. Well, I think, for me, it all starts with loving and accepting ourselves, right? Yeah. And taking 100% responsibility for our own pleasure. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to find out what it is we like. How can we do that? We can do that by experimenting with ourselves.
Yep.
With different things, with different touch, with different creams, with different lubes, with different possibilities, right? Different toys. We have to know what it is we want, right? How do we do that?
Yeah.
We cultivate our muscle of, I call it our knowing what we want muscle. And when I started doing this over 20 years ago, most of the time I was blank. I don't know. Yeah. No idea. Fabulous. Perfect place to start. I don't know. Keep asking, because eventually you'll get an answer, and you just begin to build that muscle until, I can ask myself now. I'm at a menu, and I can, because I used to sit and at a restaurant, I had no idea. I used to go into shops overwhelmed with what I wanted to buy for clothes.
Yeah.
But now it's like, no, I'm very clear. I can tune in, I can drop in, I can feel. It's like, no, that's what's going to feel good in my body to eat right now. That's what's I want to put on today to wear. That's what's aligned with, how I'm feeling. And so and it's a practice, right? And so then once I know what I want, then we go to the next stage of asking, being willing to ask for what it is that we want of somebody else, of our partner, of a beloved. And it begins with us taking 100% responsibility for our own pleasure. So then, because from that place, when I'm, empowered in knowing that I'll provide for myself, I love myself unconditionally, I accept myself unconditionally, then what happens in my partnership is, wow, all this effulgent energy of love and acceptance flows out into that partnership, and then into our family, and then into our community, and so forth.
And I would add on that, I would say that I think first of all, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think it starts with the awareness piece about yourself. Because when you start becoming aware, you can start accepting yourself. And then that can grow into self-love over time, right? Self-acceptance. And I think the other element there would be responsibility and accountability for yourself. Because it's not your partner who's triggering you per se. It's something in you that is going to get triggered, right? And I think you cannot outsource that to your partner. You need to look into yourself and take accountability on your behalf about why you're getting triggered. And that realization, I think, is something that it sounds easy. It's quite hard for a lot of people to get to that point, I guess. But if you get to that point, and I encourage everybody here to work on seeing that, right? Then you take accountability for why you might be reacting in certain ways. So I think that's part of loving yourself in that sense, right?
Yeah, no, and like you said, it is a tall order, because most of us and what we see, out in the world are, I feel uncomfortable, so you have to change your behavior.
Yeah.
That makes me uncomfortable, so we have to, not teach certain things. I mean, that's what's going on here in the US. There's certain groups that feel uncomfortable about things, so they're passing laws where they're monitoring and policing what people are teaching, particularly about Palestine, let's say.
Yeah.
So, so that's more on the, political, societal level, and it happens interpersonally. If a friend or a lover, talks to you in a certain way, and they hit a button, then please don't, if you would ask me in a different way, instead of looking at it as a mirror being held up for our own personal growth, like you were saying, we point to out there, right out there, as if there's an out there and an in here, for you to change.
Yeah, I mean, you outsource responsibility, right? That's
right. That's right.
And when you start doing that, it's sad.
Yeah. It's not as much fun. It's not as empowering, and it's certainly not as much fun. I mean, when I get reactive, I love it because it's an opportunity. It's the people who make us react. Those are our initiators. Those are our teachers. Those are where we can learn something about ourselves, where we have a blind spot, right? And so when a button is pushed, it's like, doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, this is so pleasurable. No, this is not so pleasurable. However, what's pleasurable and empowering is when I do take 100% responsibility, like you were saying. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Let me take a look. Let me, who is that? Part of the book I call is, if somebody's going to start anything, and particularly like a sure thing practice, which is about, a sensual, sexual fulfillment practice, we have to have all parts of ourselves aligned and along for the ride, right? Including like our wounded kids. And so how a playful way that I engage with the parts of myself, like I already introduced you to Vivacious Viv, is I call that we have an inner pantheon, like the Greek and Roman gods. But we have all of these, parts of ourselves. And so as we get to know the different parts of ourselves, I encourage naming the parts of, like I gave Viv a name, because once I name a part of myself, then they come to life more. I can really identify them more easily. And so when so if I get triggered by something or a button gets pushed, one of the questions I'll ask myself is, well, who is that? Is that my wounded kid? Is that righteous Rita? Is that Penelope, my perfectionist planner, who likes everything exactly, and it's not, so who is that? That gives me a clue. That'll help me kind of, be the detective of like, well, what's really going on with me? So then I can own it and just really own it and understand what's happening, on
exactly.
the world. Yeah.
And I think one other thing that I'd like to ask you here as well is, today's world is obviously very stressy for a lot of couples predominantly, right? If you think about all the logistics and everything, and I think there's like I almost like to call it like a modern burnout, especially for women. But also men are obviously here. So how do you feel that could affect erotic aliveness?
Like throwing a wet blanket over that Shakti energy, right? That's what that does. So then we have to return back to, okay, I'm 100% responsible for my own pleasure. So that means for me, I'm getting in the bathtub, because I know that recharges me. It's finding those things that rejuvenate us, that are sensate and that are sensual, that we can provide for ourselves. And so whatever that is for you, eating a particular kind of food, eating healthy food, eating, however you eat, whether you eat meat or not meat, or and lotions or oils. I do a lot of anointing of myself with holy oils. And so, having different practices, and listeners may be like, well, I don't even know. Where do I even start? Just start by asking yourself, give yourself, some time and ask yourself, what would be most nourishing to me right now? What would be most nourishing? And then give that to yourself.
That's nice. It's a nice message. Whatever it might be that gives you calm, I guess. It's one way it's about regulating yourself for yourself to be actually in a better place for you and with your partner as well, I guess, right? I think that's something I can see, not just in an argument, but actually for yourself to reduce stress. And the stress hormones are obviously not good for sexual interest or sexual erotic aliveness in that sense, right?
Right. And that could be anything. That could be going out for a hike. That could be going, that could be going to talk to your therapist. Whatever it is, just be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Be real, be honest with yourself about what it is. And you may try something and then you may feel depleted. So guess what? That's not it. So try something else, right? Like just have it be an experiment. Bring some curiosity.
Yeah. So in the book, you mentioned this weekly ritual. So why a weekly ritual, and what does then that consistency you get do to the nervous system and the whole, I would say, relational safety, emotional and relational safety?
Yeah. What a beautiful question. Well, for me, what it does is, once we had this structure of a weekly practice, it's like I no longer was worrying, thinking, feeling frustrated about what was going to happen with our intimacy, what was going to happen with our, sexual connection, because I knew we had this date. I knew we had this commitment to have this weekly practice. So all of that psychic energy that was taking up a tremendous amount of my psychic space was gone. And that's not to say we don't have, intimacy and, potentially sex more than just that once a week. And that's the sure thing. That's the reliable rhythm that that we both have come to rely on as like, this is a foundation of what, and it's not about, am I in the mood? Am I not in the mood? Am I too tired? I definitely want to watch the next episode of that show. And I know that if it's time for us to have our sure thing, if I just turn towards my spouse and ask one, often it'll start with either we'll put on our playlist and, find songs that really get you grooving, or whatever gets you grooving. Maybe it's a bath, maybe it's a massage, and ask, one of you answers the question, what would be most pleasurable right now?
Yeah.
What would be most pleasurable? And then you give it to each other. And if let's say I ask for something and that's not really what he wants to offer, so then he'll counter offer with something. It's about staying true. It's to what's true for each of us, and not this whole, sex, at least in my experience, was this tit for tat. I'll get you off, you get me off, and it's this exchange.
But that's performative, what you're saying there.
Exactly. That's right. So we take that out. So if my spouse asks me for something and I don't want to do it, I don't just capitulate because he wants it. I say, no, honey, but I'll lie here and you can stroke yourself. So I'll be here with you, or if he wants to have intercourse and I'm not there, and I'm like, no, I'm not there. That's not what, so just being able to say yes and to say no.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have a friend of mine. She's a journalist, Lisa, and she wrote an article about a couple who had sex for 1,000 days straight, every day for 1,000 days, and it was just interesting to see what actually happened within that relationship. Not just that they had really good sex, obviously, was one of the elements, but the overall communication and the overall intimacy brought them so much closer together as a result of that, right? So there were some really great benefits. And I think, having sex for 1,000 days, obviously, that sounds like a dream for a lot of people, I guess, but it's also quite, can almost be daunting if you think about it that way, right? That every day you need to have that performative side. But I think ultimately it is about just creating closer intimacy and making it more like a ritual, if you will, right? So
right. For me, what would sound more interesting would be having a sure thing, or having a sure thing. Our intention is to deepen in intimacy, connection, and pleasure, but it's whatever intention that it's your practice. So it's like you create your own intention. So maybe that's having intercourse, but for me, that would feel pressure, and I wouldn't want
No.
Pressure.
It's that could be a part of it, right? But it's more like, I think the result by doing one thing actually leads to another outcome of that, right? I think that was sort of the key thing with that exercise, was like for them to actually communicate better, be more honest and open with each other, because you are much more intimate every day, right? And I think, and this practice with this weekly practice, I think it actually achieves the same goal, right? Because you actually are much more intimate. You improve intimacy, communication. It's like an ongoing circle like that, which is beautiful.
Yeah. It is. It's there's not once, even though I'm not always feel like it, but I've never had a sure thing practice where I felt like, oh, that was a waste of time. It's the same as like if you have a meditation practice, or if you go to yoga, or have any kind of practice, or go for a run, something that is nourishing and nurturing to you, that you're not like, oh, even though it might take effort to get off the couch, once you do, you're glad that you did, right? And so that's the same with the sure thing. And I'll tell you, about a couple years into our having this weekly practice, my spouse started sharing stuff with me, and we'd been together for over 20 years at this point. And he started sharing things that he'd never shared with me before. And said, honey, I'm really moved that and I appreciate that you're sharing this with me, and I'm wondering how come now? And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, I think it's our sure thing, because I just feel so close to you.
And so, that it makes him more vulnerable with you as well, in that sense, right?
That's right. That's right.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful, and there's just this tenderness that that was not there during those first few years of heightened passion and desire and lust, that is there now. And there's just this attunement that is there now, and there's just a depth of intimacy that continues. I feel like we're continuing to explore it. Yeah.
Did that surprise you?
It did. The whole thing surprised me.
In a good way, it sounds like. So it's
in a wonderful way. And I have a lot of practices. I love practices. There's a lot of practices in the book,
Yeah.
So it shouldn't have surprised me by having a simple weekly practice that things would change so profoundly, and it still does. I'm still amazed, with our practice every week. So it continues to unfold and produce miracles and awe. So it's really just such an incredible experience that I've discovered that I absolutely want to share with everybody.
No, it's beautiful.
We don't, we're not taught. We're not taught about intimacy. We're just not. And we can learn it.
Yeah, it's coupled with shame, right? For a lot of people, it's coupled with shame. So what do you feel men most often misunderstand about safety and desire?
What do I think men often misunderstand about safety and desire?
Yeah.
I feel like men. So I'm told that men like to win, and so that's their focus often is on winning, is on having a win. And I think and so having intercourse and ejaculating.
It's performance, right? It's about
Yes. And so okay, that's okay. Recognizing that about men. I'm not saying all men are like that, but we can recognize that, and also recognize that when I'm looking to win and I'm very goal oriented, then it really narrows my frame.
Yep.
And I'm just focused on, so if, and even, as in a female body, if I'm just striving to orgasm and just reaching for it, I'm missing out on so much sensation. I'm just going for that, going over the edge, the fast contractions of the vulva.
Mm.
The whole ride, I'm missing out on the stroke, and I'm missing out on the scent, and I'm just here instead of here, right? And so I say that that's true for anyone, and certainly men who are just focused on, they just want to get into their partner's pants, right? Instead of, you're missing her neck, you're missing the whole, build up, you're missing the intimacy, you're missing the open-heartedness that arises, right here.
Yeah, I think in a simple way to put that, I would say that imagine how much more sex men could have by slowing down and taking it slower and enjoying the ride instead of focusing too much on the destination.
For sure. Absolutely. That is very succinct. Yeah. And
so it's beautiful.
To having sex, that it is that if what you're wanting is emotional closeness and you're wanting to really, be more intimate with your partner, then, put the orgasm, in the back seat and just focus on cultivating that connection and pleasure with each other. And trust me, there will be plenty of orgasms and sex, because that's what happens is when our nervous systems relax and we feel, we have what is called responsive desire.
Yeah.
Do you know about this? Responsive and spontaneous desire. Right.
Exactly. No, I can only concur with what you're saying, because if I'm looking at my own experiences, when I stop focusing on the outcome and enjoying the ride, both myself and my partner will have a lot more pleasure and orgasms as a result of that, when that is not the focus.
Yep.
And I think that's a beautiful way to experience it, and it's much more fun and enjoyable.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Right. So
yeah.
what do you think is going to flip this? What could help flip the switch? I mean, so let's say there's a lot of men listening to this, or there's women who are partnered with men who are listening.
Yeah, what I like with this,
helpful
yeah,
for you?
great question. And I mean, yes, there's this podcast actually has close to 60% of the listeners are men on this podcast, which I think is a great step forward for men around the world, because men, I think, actually want to learn how to be more in pleasure or enjoyment and giving their partner more pleasure. And I think being more present and open up, being more vulnerable and showing emotions. So for them, I mean, I think one of the key things is really, if you think about what men need to unlearn, because there are a lot of things men need to learn, but I think there are also things we need to unlearn. And I think one of the things is actually what you just mentioned here, is the fact that we need to stop thinking about winning and performing all the time, because it's not about winning and performing in relationships. And you can put this in different layers. I mean, one thing that a lot of people are doing, from my point of view, is they go into arguments. If you think about a couple arguing, and I've been in that situation, and I'm quite certain you've been there with your spouse as well, is that it's me and you against each other. I want to win the argument against you, when in fact it's me again and you against the problem, which is something else. And that realization that it's not about winning the argument against the other person. It's an understanding that we actually have a problem, which is, I don't have the problem with you, but we have a problem together here. We need to fix this problem. That realization that it's not performing, it's not the ego that drives it. Taking accountability for yourself, starting there, actually will make men. I'm simplifying this down quite a lot. There are a lot more layers to this, but simplifying that down to taking accountability for yourself, understand that you can actually see something else than a conflict with your partner, and seeing each other, what you can do, and communicating from the place, from a self-aware place, I think is a great place to start. And seeing intimacy is a journey. It's not a destination.
Well, that's so interesting. Well, thank you, because I concur, and I'm just wondering about intimacy not being a destination, because for me, a destination in you have to have a goal to get somewhere. Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, I think for me, if you think about it from men in general, and I can talk about it from both a man and a female point of view, I think a lot of guys see sex as, I need to orgasm and I need the woman to orgasm. It's a failure if nothing of that happens.
Right.
And the same thing for a woman is like, if a woman is having sex with a guy and the guy is not coming, she feels inadequate or not enough, not good enough. And that brings shame into the whole picture again, right? Just, it's like an amplifier of shame, if you will, right?
Right, because we have all of these expectations that we put on ourselves and on each other.
Exactly. So you stop communicating, and then you stop when you start feeling that shame. That's when you start, and then you start also thinking about the fear of, oh, what if he doesn't like me or she doesn't like me? I'm not good enough, right? And that's a fear driving you in that sense, right? So then you have fear in the driver's seat, not in the back seat. That's what I meant with, the destination is not the orgasm as the end result of sex. It's the whole journey you will have there about actually even foreplay starts even before you're in the bedroom, right? It can start in the day when if I would go up and kiss my partner in the neck when she's in the kitchen, or a gentle touch on the arm just in the passing, or a hand on the back, or just a gaze, whatever it might be, right? These small signs of intimacy, and then seeing each other. And I think the funny thing is when you start doing these things, one of the biggest things you see in relationships, and I see, and I've been a victim or in this as well, is sort of you stop wanting to do things because you feel somebody's just nagging on you, and you're in that circle of the woman. In most cases, is the one nagging on the man. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. Why do you look like that? Why don't you do this? Right? I mean, these things are happening in a lot of relationships, and then the guy normally then starts shutting down in the end, right? Oh, if I start talking up, she's just going to nag even more on me, right? And then it's like it just shuts down instead of actually being there and saying, because if you are starting behaving like this, like I mentioned, you see intimacy as something that actually is how you touch each other, how you talk to each other, how you look at each other. In the end, a man normally actually wants to do more, actually wants to do these things that is being nagged about, right? And one person told me that it's like the most sexy thing a guy can do is sort of go walk around with a vacuum cleaner, right? That's sort of the most sexy foreplay for a woman. It's like in one way. For some, yeah, but I mean, it might be other things.
Acts of service, acts of service. That's me. I'm an acts of service love language, so that would turn me on. But
not yes. For all people. But I mean, I think
of course, yes. But what you're saying is so wonderful about the domineering wife. I mean, I've been that. I've witnessed it in my friends, in clients, and so forth. And so, knowing that's kind of like this caricature that we can come when we're in heterosexual relationships, certainly, right? Yeah. And so recognizing that, and then we can break the pattern. And so I had this experience last week when I had asked my spouse to do the dishes, and the next morning, guess what? The sink was still full of dishes. And I had this kind of flare up of like that domineering bitch, was like, the nag, right? And then, but I saw it. And then and it was that moment of when I knew I had a choice. I could either have intimacy or I could be righteous Rita and, the nag and get on his ass about like, why didn't you do it? Which would make me feel icky and then make him, feel heavy and shrink like you were just saying.
Yeah.
So if we can like catch ourselves, and I'm thankful that at that time, I caught myself. And in the past few years that I've been having this practice, and by the way, when my spouse isn't available, I practice with myself. And if you're single, you don't need somebody to have a sure thing. You just have your own practice. And so it's more and more often I can catch myself before something naggy comes out of my mouth, right?
Yeah, so, that is very true. And I think actually one thing I want to add on that as well is sort of what I know from myself in that situation I was describing when the man is being nagged on. For me, I did not love myself or respect myself or wasn't even self-aware of myself in that point of time. And as a result, I did not put up any boundaries for myself. Because for me, one key element when it comes to self-love or self-awareness is the ability to actually set boundaries for what you accept or don't accept. Because if you don't, and boundaries is not, it's not negative in all the elements, right? It's actually just protecting yourself to some extent, as well as protecting your partner in the other way around. So what is okay, what you will accept, what you will not accept. And when you don't even have those, your partner will be able to walk all over you.
That's right.
In the end of the day, right?
That's right.
that is not necessarily the premise of a good intimate relationship in that sense, right?
Not at all. No. And that's why when somebody is talking to us in a way that's disrespectful, or, there's a boundary, boundaries are essential. And we have to have fierce boundaries.
Yeah.
And so we say, no, do not speak to me like that.
I mean, but because if you're disrespectful, that actually just fosters resentment. And when you have resentment, I can tell you there's definitely no sexual lust happening there.
No.
At all.
No, and we're causing harm to each other, and ultimately we really, it's our wounded kids, that wounded part of us that's, lashing out and then lashing back, and we get
it's two five-year-olds fighting, right?
That's
right. The playground.
Yeah, and just is not much fun.
Nope, not at all. Not at all fun. So how would you see pleasure functioning as relational medicine, not just like a sexual experience, though?
Oh, absolutely. Well, when you were talking about I call it the simmer, and that's like when you're simmering throughout the day, like, kissing your partner on the neck, or just a nice, little caress or something, or a text that says, I'm looking forward to giving you a kiss, whatever, those are little drops of pleasure. You just have drops of love that you're directing at your partner, that continue to kind of lubricate that connection of intimacy. So, whenever you can think of it, and when we're doing this with our partner, we also are doing it with ourselves too, to remember to oh, you know what, maybe I could just caress my face really just gently, like a beloved, but and how sweet does that feel? Or the self hug. I love this one, when you're just wrapping yourself and taking care of ourselves and showing ourselves that affection.
No, it's
as we're showing our partners. Yeah.
So, for a couple listening right now who feels disconnected, what would you tell them is the gentlest first step back into connection or intimacy?
Yeah, I would start with an intention. Start with them both agreeing that they want that, right? So we have overt consent and agreement that this is what we want. So come up with, some intention, some dream, some wish that you want in your relationship, and that could simply be, we want to coexist with, in harmony together.
Yeah.
We want more intimacy. We want to deepen in intimacy, pleasure, and connection. Whatever that is, but can be very simple. We just want to. I have clients who started they wanted to hug every day. They started with hugging. Okay, then it moved to kissing. Okay, so it could be something simple, something achievable, but that you both agree to. And then and then just have a regular time. It could be daily, it could be weekly, where you're turning towards each other. You're turning away from the devices, from the kids, from the responsibilities, from everything, and you're just turning towards each other. And literally, Enrique, that could be you're in the kitchen, you're turning towards each other, you're holding hands, and you're just looking into each other's eyes and taking a few breaths. You could, David Schnarch, who wrote this wonderful book called The Passionate Marriage, talks about hugging till relaxed. And so that's a practice of so he talks a lot about individuation. So that two couples are like circles. And then, most couples are codependent and they're all over and on top of each other, right? When really, if we're individuated, then this is one person, this is the other person, and they can go all around and they can spiral, but they don't cover over each other, right? So when we're hugging till relaxed, each person is standing, on their own, solid, and then you hug and you stay connected with yourself while you're also relaxing into your partner's arms.
Oh,
And so that could last 20 seconds, that could last 10 minutes if you want. And you just hug. Another, and I'll do one more, is you can just lie in bed together and hold hands.
Yeah.
Just lie in bed and hold hands and just notice what comes up and be in your own, not trying to force anything, but just breathing and noticing what happens. A desire, you may feel like, oh, you might want to make out, or you may feel like, oh, you want your partner to, massage your neck right now, or you may just want to lie there and hold hands. All of that is cultivating intimacy.
Yeah, because what you're describing here for me is really about co-regulating, right? You're actually calming the nervous system and increasing that intimacy, so stress goes down and you feel much more relaxed and you can lean into each other a lot more in that sense, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, another one I just want to touch your face, Enrique, and like you're touching my face, like we could just be, like just touch your partner's face and have them touch you and just like take a breath together, just like that. It's so intimate touching the face,
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah. So what would you love people to unlearn about intimacy after this conversation today?
That intimacy is hard and that it takes a lot of effort. What it takes is courage. That's what intimacy takes. It's really courage to be fully open-hearted in ourselves in the moment with another person. Yeah. And to share that space. And it's in the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of electric. It's kind of, you could call it a little nervousness, excitement. But that intimacy is about, it's a practice and it takes courage, and that no matter if it's been a really long time since you've felt intimate with yourself and intimate with your partner, that you can cultivate that it is not lost. It is there if that is something that you want in your life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Elana, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show tonight.
My pleasure. This was so wonderful. Thank you so much for holding this space. It's so needed right now. And may this, serve so many, many beings and just be the medicine that people need right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Intimacy rarely disappears because something is broken. More often, it fades because we lose safety, play, and permission to arrive as we are. If this conversation resonated, Elana's book, The Sure Thing, offers a simple, grounded way to reconnect. Not by doing more, but by meeting each other with less pressure and more presence. And you'll find links to Elana's work and the book in the show notes. And if this episode opens something in you, let it be an invitation, not to fix your relationship, but to listen differently. This is 34O, where intimacy begins in the body, not in performance. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay open, stay present, stay curious, and stay honest.